year after year, I sit in this chamber and we hear a lot of rhetoric from all sides. After all, that is the point of Parliament, to discuss. We hear a lot of ideology, a lot of idealism. I hear some people say that only more Europe is the answer. I hear others say that the EU is the cause of all our problems. And I fear we'll hear that same debate all over again today. And do you know what? That's why we never get anything done. That's why the EU has seen crisis after crisis. Look, I know that many of us from across the political spectrum, we came into politics because we wanted to help people. But in this chamber, we're paralysing this debate and this continent with ideology and dogma. Dogma that has caused fair-weather EU policies, like castles made of sand that fall into the sea or melt into the sea eventually. At the times, the debates, they verge on serialism, when you see someone walk down with an Angela Merkel mask. At other times, what we need is realism. We need some Euro-realism. And the migrant and refugee crisis is one example. Many people on the edges of this chamber deliberately seek to confuse economic migrants with refugees, either to let them all in or either to keep them all out. But we need to be clear about the distinction. People running for their lives, seeking sanctuary as refugees. We need to understand what they are running from. But for those not fleeing persecution or famine, we have to understand it's only human nature to want to seek a better life. But we must be clear in that case that the correct rules must be followed. There are currently legal migration systems that we have to adhere to. But we also need to be honest with our voters. The effects of the war in Syria, conflicts in Libya, Eritrea, Ukraine and elsewhere will be long-lasting. And for those who say that there are easy solutions are just plain wrong. But in the EU, rather than trying to find common solutions, we find our countries and institutions now trying to find someone to blame. Trying to find someone to blame rather than trying to find solutions. Now, some countries are unilaterally rewriting the rules. Others are clearly flouting them, undermining trust. But if there's one thing that the EU should be useful for, whatever our ideological views, surely it should be about bringing countries together to cooperate and to find solutions that we can all find together. So let's sit around a table. And I don't mean just the countries of the EU. This is an international crisis that needs an international response. Of the 4 million refugees from Syria, 90% are in camps in Jordan, Lebanon and Turkey. But some Middle Eastern countries take absolutely no one. Let's work out what each country can do to help those fleeing for their lives. But let's be clear, telling countries what to do, forcing a plan on them, only risks more finger-pointing. It might make some of you feel better, but I fear it could actually make the crisis worse, and we're further away from a solution. Because different countries can help people in different ways, and let us recognise that. Yes, some countries might wish to take migrants already in the EU. That's their choice, but others will rightly say that they want to help the most vulnerable in the camps around Syria. We have an obligation to help the millions of people displaced by conflict, not just the thousands who managed to reach our shores. And that's why some countries, including my own, are focusing their efforts on these camps and on the ground, tackling the vulnerable, delivering over €1 billion of aid to Syrian camps and helping hundreds of millions of African refugees, and actually keeping our commitment of 0.7% of GNI to build an economic infrastructure in poorer countries around the world. Let's not dismiss that sort of assistance. Other countries can also make a contribution with more funding and assistance, setting up application centres closer to where people are fleeing from, so that the vulnerable people do not have to fall into the arms of the traffickers. Others can commit the hardware and intelligence to take out the traffickers completely. And for all of us, stabilising the situation will mean investing in resources to detain, swiftly process and return those who do not have a legitimate claim. In the ECR, we want a realistic, a holistic and a practical response. There should be no sacred cows if we're going to solve this problem together. President Juncker, over the last year, we have seen an unprecedented amount of sticking plaster placed on Europe's cracks. Not least the euro crisis, more sticking plaster. We need to start finding some real solutions. We need to tackle these problems in realistic ways. The time to point fingers is over, and I hope there won't be any more of that today. It might produce headlines, but it will not produce solutions. So let us sit down together and work together. Europe does not need a new Iron Curtain. Europe needs an iron will to discuss together, work together and find a solution together. I hope you will listen. Thank you.